Hello, Ernest. Can you hear me? No. Mm, huh.
And we're live.
Oh,
Hello, Ernest.
hello, Ernest. How are you doing, Ernie?
Good.
Hmm?
How was Florida? Are you still there?
I'm here. Yeah, I actually came from a long walk. So nice. I love the weather. I
Beautiful.
hate politics, though.
I can imagine Florida would not be
Yeah.
as conducive. Let's see. I need to send our friend Tom. Oh, Tom didn't accept. I wonder if he didn't catch this invite because we bounced around so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Reminder. Send a reminder.
Yeah. Maybe the day or 2 days before, we should send a hey, everybody on for the recording.
Yeah, it's been a busy week for me. So I've been actually funny. I was meeting with our friend Anish.
Mm.
We're getting ready to sign a contract with him. So
That's good. You're making progress. Good
yeah.
progress.
So hopefully he's asleep now because it's later. But anyway, actually, you were the ones who had a bunch of concerns the last time we met, or that you wanted to process more. So I think it's still worthwhile for you and I to meet and talk over where we're at and see what your latest thoughts are.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to look at any of the documents that I sent out?
No, during the past week, no.
It was probably a 2 weeks ago, or yeah, it was probably the past week. So anyway, that's fine. We can just go over it in real time.
Yeah,
I think I've got
do it live.
Okay, so open Atom. Let me share my screen. Not that one. That's a different computational intelligence project. That's a public key. Too many Atom windows open. So big what? Open an Atom. Here we go. Okay. So what I did is I came up with 2 documents with this funky numbering scheme, which I'm very proud of, but we don't need to discuss now. I was also inspired by Forward, the New Political Party by Andrew Yang. I don't know if you took much look at any of those links, but on October 5th, he launched a new political party called Forward as part of a book tour he's doing. And his basic premise is, let's not argue about like all these different things that divide us. Let's argue about what good government should look like and focus on that. Okay. And it's actually probably worth pulling up a page because they have some really interesting stuff there. And again, it's not that I agree with everything, but I agree with his premise that hey, let's make government more responsive and efficient and effective. And then we can have meaningful disagreements about, all these other divisive issues. But like all these things seem like sort of his core principles, like ranked choice voting, right? So the idea is like right now, our political voting system is designed to polarize us. Let's fix that. That's a simple technical fix. Let's fact-based governance, which gets into the idea of datocracy, like using data to measure the right things and then measure whether institutions change that. Like, seems like a no-brainer to me. Again, hard to do in practice, but at least agree that that's the problem worth solving, right? Yeah. And then human-centered capitalism, very similar to a lot of things that you've written. We should be measuring, like, purpose. If we believe in measuring things, then we should measure what matters, which is not just money, but it's quality of life, right? And we should humanize our economy to work for us instead of seeing ourselves as inputs into a system. I think you've actually said something very similar to that before as well. The next one is effective and modern government. I think a lot of this is thinking about kind of a citizens portal. The idea that, well, the premise is we should be designing our government to be easy to interface with. That's kind of the statement, focus on that. Okay, Tom is sent me a message. I don't know what he said.
Did he answer?
He sent a message. I couldn't get too many windows open. I can't see.
Oh, let me see if I get. No, a family party still.
Oh, okay. Good for him. He's partying. Wow. 1 o'clock in the morning. Must be some party. Good for him.
Yeah.
All right. So, but yeah, this idea of like anything else in the modern world post Apple, if it exists and it's worth interacting with, the interface should be designed. That seems like a really profound statement, but we've never really tried to design our government that way. It's very much Fitts law, right? The interface is designed based on the organization chart, not based on the user experience. I don't know if that's Fitts law. That's Conway's law? No. Anyway, whatever. There's a rule about that. Anyway, the one thing that's more like policy than sort of a general principle is universal basic income. And the I like that universal basic income. To me, the interesting thing is, which he may or may not address, I don't know, how does that interact with the existing welfare system, right?
I think I've heard, during the political campaign, the presidential campaign, I heard him, he was talking about the universal basic income, the UBI. And one of the ideas or the discussion points was exactly this, does this replace welfare? Some people will say, of course, because, everybody gets, enough money to live, they shouldn't be there, right? On the other hand, people can get into trouble. It will still be capitalism, right? You can still get into debt. You can still manage your finances really badly. So even though there's UBI, you can squander it. You can do something.
Right. But the question is that then what, right? So there's two questions, right? So there's welfare for people who are like in a bad situation, right? But then, I think there's two really interesting points. So one, I was thinking about different points. One point is that, okay, if people without UBI, end up in a crisis, either because or despite their best efforts, either despite their own efforts, then what do we do, right? Is there something else, and how does that interact with UBI? Now, certainly having a basic UBI floor seems like it was simple, and that gets to the other point I wanted to make. The reason to me UBI is interesting as a replacement for welfare is, I actually agree with the libertarians on this. We have this really ugly trap where if you're really poor, there's a bunch of services for you. If you're well off, you can take care of yourself. But if you're in the middle, life is really scary. And therefore, there's this cliff. Like, I have friends who are in disability and they can't work at all, because if they make more than a tiny amount of money, they lose all their benefits. And it's a horrible, perverse incentive. You are,
and behind that is the flawed systems that we're using. I mean, if that is possible, then the system itself is terrible.
Well, yeah, but the question is that, like, it's easy to say the system is terrible. What's a better system? So one idea is to say, like, well, we should replace all these individual piecework things, which lock people into, like, they have this EBT, this for rent control, this for that, with universal basic income, universal services, that people still have something above it that they can aspire towards, but at least we define a floor for humanity. Interestingly, the reason the left is against this is that all those special interests who are tied to EBT or rent control or this and that, that's their livelihood, that they have these sort of captive government contracts. And if that gets replaced by a flat check given to poor people who can spend on whatever they want, it eliminates all those little, what was that saying? One person's waste is another person's profit margin.
Mm.
And we see that on the right with capitalist inefficient systems, but you also see it on the left with sort of these captive government bureaucracies and their little ecosystems around there. So I think that like if we went this route, you would want it to replace most of welfare.
Okay, I disagree with that, but let you continue.
In the sense that rather than being like the point is that you want to get rid of this perverse cliff, right? They call it a speed bump. Like if you make below this amount of money, we'll take care of you. But once you cross over that threshold, you lose all those benefits. That feels unhealthy, right? That's a broken system. It
is, and you're viewing it from a person that is able, a person that can think.
I'm viewing from the person of I have friends who are near that borderline, and that speed bump keeps them from participating in society fully.
Yeah, but I mean, not economically or job related, mentally. Some people cannot make decisions for themselves.
I mean, there's a whole range of different dimensions, but the point is that the way the system is now is that when you have means tested benefits, and when people's primary source of income below that threshold is all means tested, there's this massive financial disincentive for them to acquire wealth, to upskill and work, and to report income. Like all three of those things are massively disincentive in the current system. So I'd say like, okay, the thing that's most interesting to me about UBI is getting rid of that speed bump. So we don't penalize people who are thrifty, hardworking, and creative. And so what that implies to me is not that we get rid of welfare entirely, but right now we have a patchwork of welfare systems. They're really good at helping a certain set of people in certain circumstances. They're useless for people in other circumstances, which are arguably equally as bad. And B, they lock them into a really unhealthy codependent cycle with those systems. Right? So what you want is instead, let's talk about what a better system looks like, right? Is you want to have, I think UBI as a floor to say like, hey, we want to take care of people at a basic level. Let's roll them all into a really vibrant ecosystem of UBI things and services where like there's a baseline of service and that people, we can argue about how low the base is or whatever, but that like that there's a safety net that actually works, which is a single seamless safety net. Okay. That's there. And there's ways to build it financially so that it's like, it's a cash grant to the poor, it's a tax credit to the rich, it comes out, not horribly different than what we're doing now. But then that implies that, so for example, what you want to then is if you have this big broad safety net, then you have intelligent targeted interventions, right? If someone's a vegetable and cannot work at all, clearly they need some additional care and nutrition to keep them alive, okay? But if someone went on a bender and gambled away their month's UBI, like, okay, I don't want them to starve, but I don't want to enable that behavior again next month, right? You feel like that the goal is that right now, because we have these big catch-all programs and our caseworkers are so overloaded and like just the cognitive overhead of interfacing with the government to the previous point is just so horrible. Like it's really hard to be poor. And if you get one thing wrong, the whole system can be collapsing down upon you. That's horrible. If we could get that basic level of anxiety taken care of, maybe we could redirect all those services to more intelligent targeted intervention to both care for those who are truly, there's a wonderful phrase they use in Christian circles. They talk about bear one another's burdens, but each one should carry their own load. So like you need to be able to manage the day-to-day stuff, ordinary bands like yourself, or get the help to do so. But if something really catastrophic happens, everyone pitches in to help you out.
Exactly, yeah.
And the line of what's catastrophic and unforeseen changes over time, right? As we have better data, and then you say, well, then you need insurance and things like that. So there's that. So I think that's what I'm talking about. So that the safety net plus targeted interventions, that feels like a saner system.
Okay. Yeah, I see the makings of something that it is better, and like you said, it should be designed smarter, and those designs should be put up for discussion to everybody, right? We should have everybody participate in that system, and then roll it out. But yeah, we have to like. I'm thinking, which is clouding my mind, our current Congress that is not doing absolutely anything. All that is doing is just fighting. It's like a bunch of monkeys throwing shit at themselves. It's horrible. So we have to replace that. But that is the big, super huge machine that is, Republicans and Democrats. That's everybody. That's what everybody aligns with. We have the Green Party. We have other parties that, what they have done could have may have influenced which of the Democrats or Republican, which one wins. But it's really, we have to work at it. And I don't want to be I don't want to look down on things. But we have to also figure out how to make sure that it does become relevant, that it does bubble up to the top.
Right. So wait. Yeah. So sorry. Maybe we didn't even. Maybe I glossed over this too far. Are you familiar with ranked choice voting and open primaries?
Yeah.
How that?
Yeah.
So his claim, and I think this is that's their first priority, is precisely to change the way that we elect our representatives.
Mm.
And so the goal is that by, I think, so the goal is to basically create petitions in all 50 states that don't already have this. I think 13 states do. That's the version of this, is to have all the primaries and all the elections run by so they want open primaries and ranked choice voting for all public offices.
Okay.
And so the idea is that that is the thing that will break the strain. And this is what I like about his approach. He says, look, rather than just trying to create a new party, let's understand what are the systemic problems that keep us from having a new party and create this perverse incentive that only the things that people fight about are worth doing. Because anything that is bipartisan, that everyone agrees is a good idea, there's no political capital to be made by promoting it.
Mm.
Like, it's only a rare thing like big tech that gets everyone so riled up that there's a bipartisan push, because lots of other things that everyone's in favor of, but nobody wants to fight for it because it doesn't win them any political points. And
yeah,
so
it's like if nobody fights for it, then it should automatically go forward. It sounds like.
Well, I think you're just making his campaign pitch for him. Go forward.
Yeah, like you make a proposal. Yeah, I don't know if it doesn't. It smells good, but it's like, if you think about it, it's kind of weird, because okay, if somebody makes, or a bunch of people make a proposal, nobody really invests themselves in it because they don't see they don't see. And probably, I guess they also don't invest into defeating it. It just kind of invisible. It stays there because nobody hates it enough to invest political capital into it, into defeating it, or to invest political capital into bringing it up. So it just stays there. So yeah, what happens to those things?
Right. So the California, the idea that was what the referendum system was supposed to be. Is there things that the citizens have an interest in, the politicians don't, like term limits, like reductions in property taxes or whatever, then the citizens can take it into their own hands. And in fact, they actually do talk about something, I think the technical term is sortition. I think he calls it civic juries. But this is the basic idea, is that rather than, like, there's a lot of things, there is value in having professional full-time politicians whose job it is to try and understand the issues and make thoughtful proposals. We have found the opposite of that as being, there is some value in that, but there's also some danger in that, right?
Yeah, I would like to nix the word politician and just have administrator, so that.
So there, I will say that those are two different things. Like having a
civil
servant,
but politicians is just.
But let's be clear. Having a unelected bureaucrat making certain decisions is really good for certain things too. But for certain things, you want someone who knows that their job depends on actually answering to the people. And it's a different set of incentives which skews in different ways. And having a nice mix of those is important. But the interesting thing is that we don't want to use that for everything that we use it for today. I think that's the interesting point. Okay. And that's why this idea of civic juries is really powerful, is that rather than saying, okay, you don't want to say like everybody's going to spend, 2 years living in Washington, D.C., but to say, hey, you group of citizens, you're going to take 2 weeks or 30 days or 60 days. We'll put you in a nice retreat center for a month. And then you have to sit down and discuss like this question. Like, for example, like take a representative sample of Americans, like say 150 of them, and say, okay, meet together groups and try to curate a list of the top 10 issues the country should deal with in the next year or the next 4 years. Like that would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And if you drew people from a broad spectrum and had them actually conversing with each other rather than trying to host party banners, I think you would get some really fascinating insights, right?
So that's why you call them, or they call them sorters, because it's
sortition,
like,
yeah, sortition, civic juries, like a grand jury is exactly that. These are all the problems that we're facing that deserve an indictment, right?
Yeah.
And we use it in the legal system. We don't use it anywhere else. And it's a really powerful idea, and I'm glad they brought it up. And the point is that if you can develop these different tools for different problems, okay, this one you want a judge, this one you want a civil servant, this one you want a politician. If you try to design the system to make good decisions rather than just inheriting the legacy of what we're used to doing, then we can make a much more effective government.
Okay, yeah, I see the point. I would suggest, we're discussing this particular document, so I don't want to put all my views in there, but I would just this one thing.
Right, I think the interesting thing about this, right, like it's not clear that it will work, and it's probably not sufficient to sustain a long-term political party, but all of these points seem reasonably, like the first, second, third, fourth, the first 4 points, it seems like it's really hard to argue we shouldn't do this. You can argue that may not work, but like it seems like a definite, like each of these things, if we made even partial progress, would be a step function improvement in how we do business as a people, how we make decisions as a people, right? They're definitely pro-Datocratic values. In fact, we can maybe make that. UBA is a harder case to make, but it's interesting. Your point is that grace and tolerance, like this is a little fuzzy for me. I don't know how that tolerates in there, but I think it's true. Then that like one of the reasons why politics is so bad is that if you collaborate with someone across the aisle to get something done, your primary opponents will use that against you, right? So there's actually a negative incentive towards collaborating on things of broad social value because we have so much overweighted the primary system. And so that's why I think this idea of open primaries, ranked choice voting, if you can actually get it to work, even in a few places at scale, could change. Now, are there philosophical and spiritual and historical issues which are not going to go away with this, but it at least removes some of the fuel from the fire.
Yeah, I agree. This is like a set of values that in a document that represents a set of values and ideals, then that you could, either ignore the things that you don't accept really, but then go forward with with this.
Yeah.
And something that is important is it's like the word forward. Like when Congress introduced tech people, they look so stupid sometimes. They actually ask questions about how Facebook works, and I'm like, why are you insane? Like, this is not the place where you show your ignorance. And they should have like their interns should like, hey, talk to me about TikTok and all those things. Let me, like AOC. Well, AOC herself is just, she's in it. She doesn't have any interns that tell her what to. She comes up with all those things, and she's awesome at it. Other Congress people are not, and I think they are proud of their ignorance when they ask those questions.
Yeah, part of that's a generational thing too.
Yeah, I know, but so yes, the name of the party, like I said, forward. It should attract young people and people who are not interested in that legacy stuff. Yeah, legacy is okay when you're like sitting in your living room talking, going to your memories, but it's not good when you're trying to help people. That forget legacy. You have to use what you learned, not what you did 50 years ago, but what we have learned and what is better, what is best. But if you are, tied to their back in the day, back in the good old, that's why MAGA works so well, because they think that the past is better than the present. And, in the whole, of course, that is not true. In any way you can you see it.
Yeah, and the question of, anyway, we're digressing. The whole reason I brought this up was, you saw the tagline, right? Not left, not right, forward.
Yeah.
But there, the reason I'm interested in this is that they have this format they use, where in each of their policy proposals, they separately call out, they have sort of a general statement, the problems to be solved, nice list of bullet points, and a concrete set of actions. And I was thinking, I've been thinking about, so bringing us back full loop to this idea of a Datocracy decision. I said, we need some sort of format, like what makes for a good decision. And I couldn't think of one offhand, so I just stole theirs. And so that was the very first Datocratic decision, pulling from this format in forward, is like, and I think that's actually really good, because and I've noticed this in a lot of cases, people will argue what should be done before they define the problem to be solved.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, well, if the UBI is not going to, it's horrible because it's not going to solve this problem. It's like, wait, like forward party. The problem to be solved is our government systems are dysfunctional. That is the problem that they are solving. There's lots of other problems too, about people who are evil and what makes for a healthy society. And those are important questions too. But when if your operating system is crashing, it doesn't matter what app you run. You got, Mac OS 10, right? The reason I was at Apple is like Mac OS 9 was dying. We need to move to Mac OS 10. You can bring your apps over and then we can build better ones. Right? And what they're saying is, let's rewrite the operating system of government, make it a modern operating system like the Mac OS 10 project. And then, like, there's important hard questions to ask, but let's worry about these first, because if we don't get this stuff fixed, we're all dead.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that, it's entirely possible the forward party will implode after 8 years, and that would be a sign of success, that they've solved all the obvious politically hard, technically easy problems that have been sitting unsolved for 50 years. And then we can go on to the other stuff above it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's an example of a top-down type of organizational policy thing. He's going. He wants to develop a political party. So even though he has to do small things, like sign, find signatures. The first thing that you mentioned, the rank voting. Those are little things, but in the end, enable big things to happen, right?
Yeah.
So he's talking about the actual government. We have been focused on small things, groups and groups of friends that might want to change the way they communicate because they want to have more control over their digital lives. Like right now, our digital lives are owned by big for-profit corporations that are not vested in our individual welfare. We have seen that in the past few weeks, and we have to get out of that. We have to, Facebook lies to us, to our face. We're not gonna ask. Okay, it would be perfect if you just say, yeah, I'm gonna delete Facebook, delete all my Facebook info, I'm out. But then, what replaces that? You don't want to go back to like emails and texting and all that.
What was the social network before Facebook? What was that? Not GeoCities, MySpace. We don't want to go back to MySpace.
Yeah, although I think there was, I don't know if it was real or if it was somebody's joke, but the thing was that the MySpace guy, the CEO, says, "Hey, you guys, we're still here. You come back and check out."
Yeah.
My face.
This is the paradox, right? Actually,
Yeah.
is that big business, like it's easy to bemoan big business and these corporate barons, but like they've created enormous value and connection, right? If Zuckerberg hadn't done that, like we don't want to go back to the world before Facebook. We just want Facebook to be, and the irony is like a lot of Republicans bemoan big government, but the reason we have big government is Teddy Roosevelt in reaction to John Rockefeller and Standard Oil, which created the first transnational, first national and then international corporation. And like he did an enormous amount to standardize and reduce costs and create efficiencies, and also did a lot of horrible things too. And in order to, you couldn't get rid of big government. Like that was where the Greens sometimes tending a little bit myopic, and they think you can go back to everything small. You don't actually want to go back to everything small. It's really inefficient and destructive to the environment to do everything small too. But you want, and so the only solution is you need to have a big and modern enough government to rein in the big and modern corporations that gave us the modern world.
Yeah.
So he's basically trying to position himself as sort of the Teddy Roosevelt of this century in terms of reshaping and reinvigorating government to deal with the problems we face both internally and financially and et cetera. So anyway, this is our little contribution. Like I said, he's doing some really good things. I don't think it's going to solve everything, but he's creating conditions that make it easier to solve other problems. And I think, what we're trying to do with the Datocracy culture and values is another big piece of that. And so I wanted to pitch this as, let's start practicing what we preach, right? And so this is the first document, which is like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We wanna practice what we preach. That's the problem to be solved. And we talk about having transparent analyses and data sets. So let's start by having a transparent statement of how we make decisions. And it doesn't have to be great. It just has to be clear enough that we can do it and iterate on it.
Now, is this what kind of document is this?
This is an AsciiDoc format. It's a
ASCII.
slightly more rigorous version of Markdown.
Oh, okay.
So it's like an Eclipse. It's like an open standard. Eclipse owns the license on it, as opposed to Markdown, which is owned by John Gruber.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a privately owned thing. He doesn't like license it or certify it or anything. There's just a whole bunch of random communities that try to use it, and so that's why I don't like Markdown, is that it's not really a standard. Whereas this is really an honest to God open standard.
So is it a subset or superset of Markdown? Because I like Markdown's efficiency.
It's probably a superset of Markdown. It can do everything you do in Markdown, and most things are actually more concise. Like links, like this is a link, or actually even without the link, it would probably, the HTTP is enough to give it a, probably.
Yeah.
Is actually even there. So you just have a bracket after the URL with the text. And
So this is the source. You don't have to use brackets.
You just use the brackets for the text, but not for the URL.
Oh, okay.
So URLs are part of the language, so they're recognized.
Oh, yeah. You know why I'm interested, because I want like you chose this. So if you want to make decisions about it, I cannot be just married to my pages, even though I feel betrayed. But I like pages in that it's very graphical and
yes, but I mean you've been cursing pages up and down to me all week.
Well, not
pages, a corporate entity and
but Apple itself, like okay.
But the thing is it is unreasonable. This is the argument we'll have. We'll have it now, right? It is unreasonable to expect any individual entity to be perfect, to solve all the problems we want them to. I just think that's unreasonable.
Yeah, but they present themselves as, oh yeah, you can do it. Look,
and like I said, of course they do. Most of civilization is built around false promises. It's the facades we put up to make it easy for us to lie to ourselves so we don't have to deal with the hard, ugly, messy realities. And occasionally it breaks through the surface and comes back to bite us. It's like, okay, that's the price we pay for marketing and civilization. Let's try and do better. Right? And so I think like if we're going to be preaching this gospel of open standards and democratizing access, then I'm going to push you to live it out. Like the whole point of Datocracy is to live out what we say we believe. And we make this is using, I mean, it's not like it's pure. I mean, we're using GitHub, we're using commercial services to publicize all this. But I think that, if we're going to try and put a stake in the ground, this is how we want to model the values of Datocracy. And if you don't like it, submit a pull request.
Yeah.
And make the case, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we should write a document that describes how we operate, and this is like the basics of an actual storage of knowledge. Right? Okay, we chose this format. It's open source. Anybody can modify it. Like one of our tenants is open source. So it's open source that then we can do all kinds of things. Like in Markdown, I kind of didn't use it because how do I create a PDF out of this? It would be great if I could do that. And
AsciiDoc has a PDF generator, right? Because it's an open standard, there's a whole tool chain around generating HTML, generating PDFs.
Yeah, so I like that, to start with, and more power. So I'm definitely going to look at it. If you have any pointers, just send them to me.
Well, there's the link right here to AsciiDoc.
Okay, good. Yeah, because anything that frees you from corporate overlords and even
so like I would not use this to like write a flyer for my daughter's birthday, right? It's not a great
for
that, but it's actually really good for technical documentation. And actually, I have a whole nother project which is designed to create literate programming, so you can write code that that you can actually execute your AsciiDocs documents as test docs. But that's another story for another time.
Well, yeah, that's and I'm thinking about this language also. The doc. I didn't give it a name, but this in language, addresses that too. But we have to have a common language that is a PMI that people can know that like a machine can understand, and a machine can also talk to people the same way. We have to do that. Right now we have these interfaces, which can be human or non-human, that just make everything blurry for the rest of the people, so that they don't either makes themselves invaluable or not invaluable, but necessary to be there, or allows them to lie to people. So we have to make sure that people can trust the system. So if you have a common language, that would be great. I mean,
common format, and then in common, so the format's readable, and then they even have variables. So I think if you like have these things here, there's ways you can refer to that elsewhere in the document. So you can have a render.
That is amazing. Oh my God. I remember in my doc writing days, like, we should have variables.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff. All right, so okay, I think you're okay with this one here. It's a little geeky and clunky, but I think it's the right modern tool to start from as an open space. The second thing is then trying to summarize the principles. And the DP, the Datocratic principles, they should be simple enough that we can actually use them, but they should be complete and aspirational enough to guide, inspire future. So I want to say like, okay, we can look at these principles and we can come up with a way to measure them, and we can even use those principles to iterate on the principles. It's like, okay, this principle tells us that, we don't have enough principles because we're making the same problem. It's like a unit test, or integration test that tells us what unit tests we need. And so these are the principles that we had discussed way back with Anish. And then these were the two questions I suggested at the end of our last session as a starting point, not necessarily ideal, but good enough to bootstrap us. Like, what did we consider everybody's opinions, and do we think we can track it later? So those were the simplest two questions I could think of to get us started. And if we keep iterating on that, that could help us flesh out other questions that we need to be asking more rigorously.
So the answers appear to be, well, let's try this AsciiDown, or what is it?
AsciiDoc.
AsciiDoc. Let's have this common report. You have it on GitHub, I guess?
Yep, it's already on GitHub.
Yeah, become this common repository. Now, I'm concerned about terminology, right? And the separation of concerns. So we have the principles we are using to design this system,
right.
But they're not the same as the principles that a user of the system would have. So in my head, it's like we have to facilitate any type of political, religious, whatever organization to use this system to do their thing, to behave honestly and all that stuff. But if that is separate from the way that we created the system. So we create the system, we're interested in accuracy and keeping transparency so that anybody can access that information. Now, a real user might want to overwrite that, but that's okay. We're not concerned with that. We're concerned with providing this starting point. So we have the principles we use to design the system, and then later we can say, okay, based on this system, we can come up Datocracy, which has its own principles, right? That are separate from how do we write. Like perfect example. We're using this AsciiDocs to communicate our ideas, but that is not what a user of the this mechanism.
Right. Right now, I'm just defining this as like a demo. Let's just call it a demo. So the Datocracy Committee is a demo of one way to implement Datocracy, right? This is or maybe a prototype's a better word. This is the prototype. We're building a prototype to see what it looks like. And then once we've built this prototype, we say, okay, and that's to solve just this one problem, right? The problem to be solved is we want to define, practice, and model Datocracy in a way that inspires and empowers others to do the same. So once we've done this for ourselves, then other people can do it for themselves too. They can create their own systems around this, right? It's all open source. They can steal this, copy it, fork it, whatever. And they say, okay, we're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna build a gee whiz bang WYSIWYG editor for doing all this stuff. It's like, great. That's a wonderful thing to do. And if they say, and we're going to lock it in a binary format that only people who pay us royalties can read, we can say that's against our principles.
Yeah,
these principles.
Exactly.
But hey, if you do it as an open source, open standard thing, great, so much the better, right? And the point is that like what Tom Gilb was doing was defining Datocracy for a society, and in a society you worry about the environment, and these are the different values, and it's like, okay, that's a grand vision, but that's like hard, and that will take like months, if not years or decades to do.
Generations.
But this we can do in weeks, right? We can build a simple system that we use, that we start doing ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so so you're okay with this government document? This feels like this part is, it's, you're not entirely thrilled with it, but it seems like a good place to start.
Yes.
Okay, so let me go ahead and so what I want to do is I think I should fork this and remove the D1. Since we're here, and I did send this out to Tom. He didn't comment, and it's not that hard to change later if he disagrees. But I want to like do something concrete by proving this one and promoting it to. Actually, I'll promote this and I'll send a pull request to Tom to review and comment on before we merge it. That seems the most accurate, most fair way to do this.
Okay.
And then this is now the 15th. Okay, now for this one, again, we want to make this review as well. So the problem to be solved, simple but aspirational, so we can just give us something to align around. And in terms of these 4 principles, you still feel good about these?
Consider our data, make decisions transparently and inclusively, measure impact numerically, and capture learning for future improvement. Yeah.
And then these 2 questions as a starting point for how we evaluate. So it's like a 2-bit number. right? Is we do the survey and we get a yes or a no. And just so you know, my expectation is we'll answer yes to the first question and no to the second. Like right now.
To track the results of this, we don't have enough to track. Oh, well, you mean like a measuring system? Because it involves going into the future, right? Like, okay, we made the decision, but then we have to see how good a decision it was by analyzing it over time.
Right, like, yeah. So we have something, but and this is like a feeling statement, right? This is not like you have to defend it. It's like, how do you feel right now? It's like, I feel good about this question, about this one. Like I personally, I'll say that. I feel like we've been done a good job of socializing all our values and getting consensus around this. And I guess that's an interesting point is that, actually, I'll ask this question. Do you think the question we should be asking each person is, do you think our values were taken into account, my personal values were taken into account? Or do I feel like everyone's values were taken into account? Which do you think is a better question?
Okay. Now I know it's kind of late, but now that I think about that, do you feel your values were taken into consideration when this decision was made? Well, it is your responsibility to make sure that your values are represented in the decision. So it's that's like saying, were you heard, right? During the decision where you paid attention to and considered, not and consider. So you spoke, you participated in the decision. Therefore, just by doing that, the answer should be yes. But yeah, you're right in that maybe it wasn't. And that's, I want to take feelings out of it. I want to make sure this is as concrete as a compiler. Yeah, syntax error, you cannot compile it, it doesn't work. But and take feelings out of this. But you're asking if a person feels that even though they did all the participation, they provided all the data, whatever, did everything right, can you still feel that your values were not addressed? That can be true, but then how do we address that? I mean,
well, the point is that, right, like this is literally a 1-bit question, right? It doesn't tell us a whole lot, but it tells us something, right? And right now it's just me, you, and Tom, right? Is the three of us. And it's like, okay, do you feel like when I'm proposing this thing we're in here, did you feel like your values were taken into consideration when we made this decision? And hopefully the answer is yes.
Yes.
Right? So like, okay, so we've solved that, we've made that round, and like we can probably find a better question when we have better systems and more diversity, but this is a good starting question. If we fail that one, now I guess that the simpler question is just to ask each one individually. Now, it's worth thinking about the larger question of, when you get a larger group where not everyone is actively participating, like, hey, I felt like I was heard, but my friend Joe didn't really get enough advance notice. I'm worried about that, but that seems like a second order concern down the road.
Now, you mentioned the term diversity. I don't know if it's one of the values in here, right? I don't think so. Well, it's in our heads, right? And,
so I use the word inclusively.
So that's something those are different things.
I know they are, but like the point is that right now we're just making decisions for the three of us about this abstract thing. No one else really has a stake in it.
Okay.
That's why I'll run it by Anish later maybe, but I mean, the important thing is when you're making decisions for a community, you include everyone in that community who's affected by it.
Yes.
That's what I mean by inclusively. Diversity is interesting in the process, but I don't know how to
how to compute it.
Yeah, like and like usually what happens, diversity is easy, inclusivity is hard.
Diversity is easy because all you have to do is put white faces or brown faces or in there. Like when we can say that we are diverse, if we include Tom and yourself, 4,
no girls, no women.
Oh wait, not that. Yeah, exactly. Back in today's world, we are not diverse.
We're not diverse, but then it's hard to find anything, to fight and like that's a concern for evolving it. But I don't know how to define or measure that yet, because like, who would I want to drag into this? My wife kicked me out of our dining room because it was getting too annoying for her. So I think we have to be a little further along before we can understand who can we pitch this to that would be interested enough to participate in it. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's worth raising as a question. I just don't have an answer for it yet.
Okay.
I'm good to add that on the, really what I should do is I should submit this, and then we should make all those comments on the pull request so we have them stored on the server.
Yeah.
Maybe I will add them to the comment phase on it. But anyway, the first
So
question,
this document is something that we can all contribute to and edit and all that stuff. And
yeah, if you have a GitHub account, which I assume you do,
yeah, I do.
I would imagine Tom does as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm going to, the plan is for me to submit this as a pull request.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I'm thinking small and big. I'm thinking we have to define all these things, all these words, inclusivity, diversity. And we can go Tom's way, he has all these super big list of the glossary thing that is essentially the core of language, how things, and even though the definitions themselves are kind of like not final, right? He says, no, this is not definition. It's an alias for an idea.
Yeah.
So, okay. I don't know if that's helpful really, but because
I would love to turn language into something more like an open format. But the other point was that like the way that I actually want to solve that problem is not so much by like having a bunch of definitions, but more by like, as Anis would say, turning semantics into syntax. Like, how do we measure it is really what tells me what these words mean. And then we have to probably define other terms to make those things make sense. But I want to at least start here. And that's it. Like, so the first question, I think we feel good about the question, both in terms of asking it and answering it, right? At least the three of us. And then in order to do better, I think it's important to ask this question, which is like, how are you defining these things? How are you measuring them? And the answer is, I don't think it's very good yet, but at least we're asking that question so we know it's not good. And then, maybe the next decision is, okay, someone could propose a system for how we record and track decisions and their consequences. And at least we can capture that the problem exists and leave that as we have one green test, one red test. The red test says we don't have a way to track this stuff or measure things. And that's what until we have concrete measurable ways to capture these principles, we're not even doing that very well. But hey, at least we acknowledge that. We know that that's the thing that we're not doing, that we need to do better in the future.
Yeah, I like that. I'm intrigued by the processability of the text content that we put in here. Like variables we can use or write our own processing system, to put out XML, PDF, or other types of documents that might be, and the ability to adapt to those things too freely with no concerns of licensing and all that stuff. That's beautiful, and that's the way it should be. And I am really intrigued by that. And in the next few days, I will be down with AsciiDoc, because it's like the clearing in a forest when you lost or something. I don't know, or an oasis. It looks like an oasis, and we had to make it concrete because I love, even though it will pull me away from my beloved Pages, but like you said, I will use Pages to do my birthday invitations, and I will use AsciiDoc for our knowledge storage and decision making documentation thing.
Resolve conflicts? No. Okay, we're good. Who does conflicts? What are the conflicts?
You have conflicts with Tom's.
Oh, because I made that edit change there. I want to do I just removed the link thing here, so I'm going to do. How do I do this here?
And this is what we get when we have, revisions.
I may have forgotten to pull in something from master. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, we have a buggy pull request which we have to fix before next week. So
Okay.
we'll leave on a cliffhanger for this episode.
Make sure it compiles.
Yeah, we passed the tests, but there
Yeah.
was a merge failure. I do have tests because this is built on my web app that I'm using for my other projects. So if we do generate HTML, it would be a matter of a few days work to actually serve them up on a server somewhere where people can hit them publicly. But until then, it's all like right here on GitHub, pretty easily to read, like you can see.
Yeah. Well, GitHub has these GitHub pages. I don't know.
But you don't even really need that because you just go here and you see.
We don't. Okay, now we'll just focus on us, the four of us, and not necessarily external people. Right now, it's just to serve.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it renders it nicely, and we can create a top level README without too much trouble. It's not a bad thing to do. So anyway, for now, we can browse it easily enough on GitHub, and then make it something nicer down the road. But yeah, make it as simple as possible to get started.
Yeah. What editor do you use? Is it Sublime or is it something
Atom, which is the GitHub editor.
Oh.
It's well maintained, unlike Sublime.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sublime, TextMate, they all kind of got a little crufty. But Atom is a native Electron app built by GitHub, and so it's got a very rich package ecosystem.
Okay. Is it an app or a web?
It's a native app that uses Electron technologies it's a progressive web app, I guess, because it's built using HTML and CSS, but it runs natively in a Chrome engine, I think.
Okay, so I can use it in macOS.
Oh yeah, I'm running on Mac still.
Cool. Yes, still. every day I think, man, should I even stay? Or the cost of moving out of it they're immense. So I kind of like
financial and emotional.
Emotional too, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to use more open source tools like Atom and GitHub and things, wean myself off it gently.
Yeah, exactly.
Until we write our own operating system in the future.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
All right, start at the top, work our way down. All right, thank you, Ernest.
Thank you, Ernie.
Hopefully this time next week will work. And try and get a reminder out ahead of time for Tom.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
Bye.